What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I will be setting up my fantasy cruncher for tonight's single game slate between the Cardinals and the 49ers for the largest field GPP on FanDuel. First thing I'm going to do, actually, first thing I'm going to say is while you're coming in, please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. All right, second thing I'm going to do is go to my columns and adjust. I have a quick view saved with the columns set up the way I want them, the most relevant information to me in the middle of the screen, that being ownership projections, my point projection, which is the stochastic point projection by default, exposure cap, etc., etc. All right, next I'm going to go into the MVP tab, set an exposure cap on all players in the MVP spot of 20%. Nothing magic about that number, just what I use most frequently is I spread out to at least 5 players in the MVP spot. So the most I can get of any player in the MVP spot is 20%. Some slates you might want more of certain players. Some slates you might want to spread it out more and set this to 10%, something like that. But this is how I usually start. Next, I'm going to go into here, the all tab, and sort by projection. And I'm going to uncheck every player. There we go. I'm going to uncheck every player with a projection of 0, with the exception of Colt McCoy, because I believe Colt McCoy is actually going to be starting tonight. This is just for the purpose of setting groups. It's going to go a little bit quicker if I don't have these players in the pool mucking things up. Maybe should have gone the other way here and unchecked everybody and rechecked the ones I wanted, but too late for that now. I think this FanDuel player pool is significantly larger than the DraftKings player pool. Okay, so I've unchecked everybody other than Colt McCoy with a projection of 0. Now I'm going to go into the advanced options tab. I'm going to be working within 2 tabs here, the general tab and the groups tab. Starting with the general tab, unique players per lineup, I'm going to leave at 1, building for a 150 set. If you were building for 20 or fewer lineups, I would typically recommend changing this to 2 unique players so that your lineups will be a little bit more diversified. Unique players per position, not going to set a minimum. I am going to set a maximum just for the purpose of avoiding the most duplicated lineups. My goal when I win is to win a lot of money. And so I don't want to have lineups that are going to be duplicated 1,000 times, preferably not 100 times either, preferably 10 or fewer times. And one way to avoid the most duplicated lineups, probably the easiest way, is to just leave some salary on the table. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to leave 1,500 on the table and just use up to 58,500 in salary, and as opposed to the 60,000 allowed by FanDuel. Offensive players versus defense, I'm going to change this from the default to max of 4 players. So I could theoretically have 4 offensive players from the Niners against the Cardinals defense. We've seen it work before. I think that it's perfectly reasonable to have just the defense from one side of the game. So that's what I'm allowing there. Global exposure cap, I already set the cap in the MVP spot to 20%. In the util spot, I'm going to leave it at 100%, so I could get up to 100% of a player in the util spot. Maybe if I did actually get to 100% on some slates, I'd probably adjust projections, probably adjust things so that I don't get quite that much, but I generally do allow for it. Randomness, I typically use 50%. If you want a little bit more control over your lineups, you could change this to a lower number, maybe 10%. Obviously, 0% would mean you have complete control using your groups and other functions in Fantasy Cruncher. But typically, 10% is a good number. If you want a lot of control, you're still giving up a little bit, but also 10%. Just having some randomness on there will speed up the Fantasy Cruncher a good amount. So I'm going to use 50%. If you want more control, use a little bit lower. And also, if you're using classic randomness, you might want to use more like 30 or 40%, something slightly lower. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, all free. Zero risk. Sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. Minimum projection included in calculation. The default is set to 3. I'm going to leave it at 3, so any player projected for fewer than 3 fantasy points, not currently in my player pool. If I decide I want some of those players in my player pool, I will just manually adjust their projections to make sure that they're higher than 3. And players from each team max, I'm going to allow up to 4 players from one team against 1 player from the other. All right, now I'm going to go to the groups tab and create a few groups centered around the quarterbacks. I'll start with Jimmy Garoppolo in the MVP spot. I'm going to make my key player. So this entire group is just based around lineups that have Jimmy G in the MVP spot. Jimmy G MVP is my key player. Now I'm going to add all of these 49ers pass catchers to a secondary group. And you can see this is where it helps to have avoided. Oh, actually, I've still got Marquise Brown in there. Whatever. But generally, I've avoided all the players that have a 0 projection. I've unchecked them so they're not showing up here. Cool trick that Peter taught me this week. Now I can just add all of these 49ers pass catchers with a projection to my secondary group. Okay, good to go. And for this lineup, you could change this and say require at least 2 players because Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't have a ton of rushing upside, but he has rushed for a couple touchdowns this year, rushed for a few last year as well. So I think that the rushing touchdown is in his bag of tricks. So I think that it's possible for Jimmy Garoppolo to be the optimal MVP with just 1 pass catcher in the lineup, assuming that he does rush for a touchdown or somehow put up some fantasy points outside of throwing the ball. So I'm going to allow in a 150 set for just 1 pass catcher paired with Jimmy G in the MVP spot. Typically, though, if you are building 20 or fewer lineups, I would probably just change this to require at least 2. But for me, I'm going to require at least 1 and then also give some projection boosts in these lineups to his pass catchers to make it more likely that I get multiple. A smaller boost to the running backs. Okay, looks good. A Jimmy G MVP group. Now I'm going to make a Colt McCoy. So currently, we don't actually have Colt McCoy starting this game in our projections, but I think the latest news suggests that Colt McCoy is going to be playing quarterback for the Cardinals tonight. I'm actually going to go ahead and X out of here real quick and change the projections a bit. So we've got Kyler in, McCoy out. I'm going to assume that Colt McCoy is starting here. I'm going to give him, I don't know what he's going to project for. I'm going to give him a 12 fantasy point projection. All right, so if I have Colt McCoy in the MVP spot, so I'm going to go ahead and find him, McCoy MVP, add him as my key player. Actually, I could also, I'm going to include Kyler here as well. Kyler MVP is my key player, just in case the news goes the other way close to lock. Currently, things are pointing towards Colt McCoy, the starter, but we don't have definitive news yet, so I'm going to include Kyler in this group as well. But I'm going to build under the assumption that it's Colt McCoy. All right, so I'm going to add all of these Cardinals pass catchers to the secondary group. Going to include the running backs. Okay. And again, you could also with Colt McCoy at quarterback, he has very limited rushing upside. You could just say use at least 2 players. That's probably what I would do building 20 or fewer lineups. Actually require 2, but for a 150 set, any quarterback pretty much can fall into the end zone at some point during the game. So I'm going to allow for just 1 and then give projection boost once again to all of these pass catchers to make it more likely that in those lineups I get to multiple Cardinals pass catchers. And smaller boost to the running back. Good. Okay. So same thing for this group. Now I've got Kyler in here. If we do get news that Kyler is starting, I would probably just leave things as is, except go and check this box and say, so I'm not requiring any pass catchers from the Cardinals. But I am giving boost to the pass catchers to make it more likely that I get one or two in there. Because Kyler, unlike Colt McCoy, obviously has some rushing upside. So he's a little bit different quarterback. So you don't necessarily need to force in one or two pass catchers, but still, you generally prefer it. Okay. Now, secondary group. I'm going to make a Jimmy G flex group. I'm going to find Jimmy G in the flex, make him a key player, and then again, add all of these Niners pass catchers to a secondary group. And now, because I've got Jimmy G in the flex, I can also add these pass catchers in the MVP. Okay, good enough. Now, you could go a couple different ways. So you could, on FanDuel in particular, it's a little bit more likely that a lineup with Jimmy Garoppolo in the flex without any pass catchers wins. You know, if he does have a rushing touchdown, and the Niners don't really score any other touchdowns, it is at least feasible for Jimmy Garoppolo to be optimal in the flex without any pass catchers. So you could just say uh, only apply plus minus adjustments and then give boost to all these players in a 150 set. I think I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to require it. If I've got Jimmy G in the lineup, require at least one pass catcher somewhere else in the lineup from the Niners. I think that the most likely scenario is you don't see a lineup winning with Jimmy Garoppolo without any pass catchers from the Niners. So I think I'm just going to make this my group. I'm going to require at least one. But I think that it would be viable to do it the other way, where you don't require it and just give boosts, because FanDuel, it's not full PPR, so it's a little bit more likely. All right. Colt McCoy flex group. So I'm going to go ahead and find Colt McCoy in the in the flex. Make him my key player. Again, I can do the same thing and add Kyler to this group and adjust later if Kyler ends up being the quarterback. And then to the secondary group, I'm going to add all of these Cardinals pass catchers. Including in the MVP spot. Okay, good enough. All right. So now, same decision point. You could, not force in any Cardinals pass catchers in lineups with Colt McCoy in the flex. I think I'm just going to leave it like this and say, if I've got Colt McCoy in the flex, require at least one of these players. And then if it were Kyler, if we get the news that Kyler is starting, I would actually go and, check this box and maybe give a little bit of a boost. Maybe even, you don't even necessarily need the group if Kyler he has enough rushing upside that he's certainly viable in the flex without any pass catchers, but you could still give a little bit of a boost. But for this group, I think this is how I'll leave it. I'm just going to require at least one pass catcher if I have Colt McCoy anywhere in the lineup. All right. And I'm going to save this and then see what happens. I'm going to crunch out lineups. All right. First lineup we see Jimmy G in the MVP spot. Two pass catchers. That's my preference. That does include obviously Christian McCaffrey, a running back, but he is very involved in the passing game. So looks good to me. Second group, we got Christian McCaffrey in the MVP with Jimmy Garoppolo. Looks good. Jimmy G with at least one pass catcher in Christian McCaffrey. Looks good. Jimmy G and Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. Looks good. Yeah, in general, I think these lineups look good enough to me. I'm not seeing anything jump out as there's no way this lineup wins. Jimmy G in the MVP with multiple pass catchers. Now, how much did I get to? Okay, I got 10% Colt McCoy and also 7% at MVP. So I'm going to look at those lineups specifically. Colt McCoy at MVP. Okay, Colt McCoy at MVP with Trey McBride and James Conner. That looks good. Trey McBride and James Conner looks fine. Now, how did this happen? Colt McCoy at MVP with just Matt Prater. Did I include Matt Prater in that group by accident? All right, I'm going to go back to that. Oh, I added the wrong Colt McCoy here. So I added the flex Colt McCoy. I'm going to go ahead and change that. McCoy MVP, make him my key player. This is why it's important to always double check your actual lineups and see if they look the way you want them to. All right, so now I'm going to recrunch. All right, still getting the same amount of Colt McCoy. Let's see how they look now. Okay, so now I did allow for just one pass catcher seen right away. Colt McCoy with just Rondell Moore. I think that's okay. McCoy with McBride and Connor looks good. McBride and Connor, getting to a lot of Trey McBride, McBride and Moore Connor, just McBride. Okay, so in general, I think it's fine. I am getting to how much McBride do I have? 80% McBride. I don't know that I necessarily want Terry McBride. I mean, it might be fine to have 80% Trey McBride in my McCoy MVP lineups, but I might go back and just adjust slightly in these lineups and say, okay, maybe I don't give McBride, maybe he projects too well point per dollar, give him slightly lower boost, and then maybe I give a little bit more to some of these guys that I'm not getting to as much. Oh, this is also going to change things because currently both Robbie Anderson and AJ Brown are not in my player pool, so maybe I should actually adjust that first. All right. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, all free. Zero risk. Sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. So in general, my lineups correlate fine. Some of them, I don't think I love the amount that I'm getting to of just Trey McBride and James Conner in my Colt McCoy MVP lineups, but generally they look fine. They all look feasible. But the secondary thing that I would do is go ahead and look at each tab, position by position, and look at am I getting to the amount that I want of each player? Maybe I want more than 5% Colt McCoy, give him a little bit of a projection boost. Running back, okay, getting to 47% McCaffrey looks good, 43% Connor, only 8% Eli Mitchell. Maybe I'd want a little bit more there, so I'd give him a little projection boost. Deontay Ingram, currently getting 4.7%. He is the backup to James Conner. If James Conner gets hurt or something, I think he comes in and he's the primary running back. Maybe I'd want more than 5%. Not necessarily. Again, I'm not making these actual decisions right now. I'm just kind of showing you what my process looks like and the things I'm thinking about as I am deciding player exposures and adjusting projections. Not getting to any DeAndre Hopkins growth. 3%, I guess a little bit, not zero, but maybe I'd want more than 3% DeAndre Hopkins. Got to give him a little projection boost there to get it. Not getting to okay, so AJ Green, Robbie Anderson, all these guys project for below 3 fantasy points. So if I want them in my player pool, I need to actually give them a little bit of a projection boost, make sure that they're above 3 fantasy points. So maybe I go 4 for AJ Green and 3.6 for Robbie Anderson and 3 for Dortch Gray. All right, getting to a decent amount of Kittle, ton of Trey McBride, Steven Anderson, not currently in my player pool. Who knows? Maybe he takes on a bigger role now as well with Zach Ertz out. So maybe I give him a little bit of a projection boost. Don't think I need, I don't know, Tyler Kroft. Maybe I'll get him into my player pool just a little bit. Getting to a decent amount of the kickers. Getting to none of the Cardinals defense. Maybe I want to adjust that a little bit. Again. And this is exactly what my process looks like, just bit by bit. What am I getting to now after I've made some adjustments? Still not getting to much Cardinals. Maybe I'd go in and say, I think I want more Cardinals. Give them a projection boost. Kickers, okay, they came down a lot after I adjusted elsewhere. So maybe I give them a little bit of a projection boost as well. Now I'm getting to 15% Steven Anderson. That might be fine. He's only coming in at 2% projected ownership. If you think he's going to take on a bigger role in the offense with Zach Ertz out, maybe that's a steal. Maybe this is a good leverage spot. But maybe you think that's a little bit aggressive. So maybe I adjust him down to 3 fantasy points. Yeah, 12%, 13% Danny Gray, probably more than I need. Nothing. I can't lower his projection anymore. If I do want him in a player pool, maybe I just throw him out. Or, you could go in now to advanced options and change this here and say minimum projection included in calculation to 2, and then lower his projection from 3. But I'll probably just adjust elsewhere to get to more of other players and get less of him. Adjusting a little bit. Okay, maybe I want more of this player. Adjust upward if I want more, downward if I want less. Nothing magical about it. Still only 11% DeAndre Hopkins. And as you can see, I adjust very little bit. Typically, most of the adjustments I'm making are for under 1 fantasy point at a time. Sometimes it's just like 0.2 at a time for some of these players until I get to the amounts that I want. Also, always keeping in mind that projections are relative. So as I adjust one player up, other players' projections come down relative to that player. So always keeping that in mind too. Sometimes I adjust by 0.2 fantasy points just because I want to keep approximately the same amount of one player, and I know that I've adjusted a lot elsewhere. Still just 9% Colt McCoy. Maybe I want a little bit more than that. Adjust him up. And crunch again. And again, I think this is going to be my final crunch here, just kind of trying to give you an idea of my process. So yeah, I adjusted now. I'm up to 16% Colt McCoy after that adjustment, and I'm up to 10% Eli Mitchell after I adjusted him upwards. Now I'm down to 1.3% Keontae Ingram, 12% Kyle Juszczyk. Would probably prefer to have more Ingram relative to Juszczyk as the direct immediate backup, but so maybe I'd adjust Ingram up a little bit and leave Juszczyk where he is. Again, Danny Gray, same thing. Still getting to way too much. As I adjust these players up a little bit, I'll get to less Danny Gray, or I could do the easier route and just change it to minimum of 2 to be included in my player pool, and then lower Danny Gray's projection. Different ways to the same result. But again, not going to go through all of those steps right now. I'm going to be making player decisions after I've dug into it a little bit more, and after we, have inactives and know who's actually playing tonight. Don't want to be making lineups before then. So that is going to do it for this video. Good luck tonight. Hope you can find some success using this or a similar process.